Chapter 1. A Guild Master's Duty. The necrotic chill of the frozen prison was absolute. Designed by the supreme beings to sap the will and vitality of any living creature, the ambient temperature on the 5th floor was enough to shatter steel. Sprawled across the black ice lay the extra seat of the Black Scripture, Zeshi Zetsume. She was utterly broken. Her legendary equipment lay in ruined fragments around her, her consciousness adrift in the dark, freezing waters of total defeat. Mayor Bello Fiore stood over her, his small hands gripping the staff of Ainz Gown, the shadow of Yggdrasil, with white-knuckled intensity. The dark elf guardian's mismatched eyes, usually wide with timid shyness, were narrowed into a rare, grave severity. Ainz Sama. Mayor's voice trembled. It wasn't from fear of the battered enemy at his feet, but from the terrifying weight of the report he was about to deliver. During the combat, she used them. First, she summoned the Einherjar. And then, she cast, the goal of all life is death. The crimson points of light within Ainz Gown's empty eye sockets flared, trailing distinct, burning wisps like twin comets. To a native of this new world, those abilities might seem like random, high-tier magic. But to a player, to Ainz, the implication was catastrophic. The specific timing, the sequence, it was a signature. She possesses a talent capable of copying trump cards, Ainz deduced instantly. And for her to have copied those specific skills, she had to have been there. She was present at the most shameful, heartbreaking moment in Nazarik's history, his deathmatch against the brainwashed Shaltir Bloodfallen. I see. Ainz's voice was a resonant, cavernous baritone, entirely devoid of tremors. It was the voice of the ruler of death. Inside his skeletal ribcage, however, the frantic heart of Suzuki Satoru was pounding out a phantom rhythm of sheer, unadulterated panic. This is bad. This is very, very bad. If she saw that fight, she knows my weaknesses. She knows I rely on cash items. She knows the absolute limits of my mana pool. The realization clawed at his mind, far worse than the cold of the room. If she was watching, her masters were watching. I shall verify it myself. Ainz extended a skeletal hand toward the unconscious half-elf's forehead. He couldn't afford to hesitate. The absolute safety of Nazarik was on the line. Control amnesia. The 10th tier spell took hold instantly. Ainz's consciousness plunged into the murky sludge of the girl's mind. It was a chaotic storm of recent agony, humiliation, and fractured pride. But Ainz was an overlord. He pushed through the mental debris with ruthless, surgical efficiency, swimming hard against the current of her thoughts. Show me, he commanded silently, pouring more mana into the spell to force clarity upon the chaos. Show me the day you watched us. The memory sharpened, focusing through Zeshi's eyes. He saw the blasted wasteland. He saw Shaltir. Then, the perspective shifted to the figures hiding in the periphery. A group of humans clad in strange, elite gear. The Black Scripture. And standing among them, an old woman wearing a distinctive cheongsam. Ainz's non-existent stomach dropped into an endless abyss. It was a dress woven from swirling silk that seemed to breathe with a life of its own, radiating an aura that completely defied the magical laws of this reality. Downfall of castle and country. The connection snapped. Ainz withdrew his hand as if the girl's skin had turned to magma, the spell dissipating into the freezing air. The silence that descended upon the prison was heavier than the black ice beneath their feet. Even the ambient, howling winds of the 5th floor seemed to die in the presence of the Supreme One. Ainz finally knew. He knew the identity of the insolent fools responsible for the Shaltir incident. The slain Theocracy. They were the bastards who had violated the sanctity of his family. They were the ones who had dared to enslave a floor guardian, a beloved daughter painstakingly crafted by his dear friend, Perencino. They were the ones who had forced Ainz to execute his own friend's child with his own 2 hands. A violent, catastrophic surge of emotion erupted from the core of his being. It was a roaring inferno of hatred, a visceral, blinding desire to grind their entire civilization into dust, to burn their history, and to make their citizens scream until the end of time. Vroom! A pulse of gentle, emerald light enveloped his skeletal body. The passive racial skill of the Overlord activated, forcibly suppressing the emotional spike. The roaring fire was instantly snuffed out, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. But the suppression only removed the chaotic agitation. It did not remove the intent. The dark, heavy sediment of his hatred remained perfectly intact. Albedo. The Guardian Overseer stepped seamlessly from the shadows. Yes, Ainz Sama. Her golden eyes were wide, her pupils dilated as she sensed the drastic shift in the air. She looked at him with intense, breathless anticipation, like a fanatic awaiting a divine revelation. The slain theocracy is to be destroyed. Ainz's voice was scarcely more than a whisper, yet it carried the absolute, unyielding weight of a death sentence. Immediately, Albedo's breath hitched. A heavy flush of terrifying, genuine ecstasy bloomed across her pale cheeks, and the black wings at her waist twitched erratically. To receive a direct order for total, unmitigated war from her beloved master was a joy beyond measure. Understood, Ainz Sama. I shall mobilize the full forces of Nazarick at once. We will scour their land until not even ash remains. She bowed so deeply her dark hair swept the ice, trembling with sheer delight before turning on her heel. Her footsteps clicked sharply against the floor as she rushed off to execute his divine will. The heavy iron door of the prison slammed shut, sealing Ainz inside with Mare and the unconscious captive. As soon as he was out of his overseer's sight, the emotional suppression wore off just enough for the familiar, deeply human panic of Suzuki Satoru to bubble up in his non-existent chest. Ah, wait, hold on, was that too fast? His internal monologue began to sprint, his imaginary stomach doing violent somersaults. Albedo and Demiurge, they definitely had a plan for the theocracy, didn't they? Some incredibly detailed, multi-year scheme to subvert them, incite civil unrest, and take over their economy from the inside. By ordering an immediate annihilation, I've probably just ruined months, maybe years, of their hard work. I just threw their brilliant, Sasuga Ainz Sama, schemes right out the window. A pang of crushing corporate guilt washed over him. As an administrator, he felt like a complete failure. He had let his temper dictate guild policy. He had just exponentially increased the workload of his most loyal subordinates because he couldn't control his anger. I really am a terrible boss, aren't I? But as the self-doubt of the salaryman lingered, a colder, older thought rose from the very depths of his avatar's soul. The persona of the guild master refused to yield. Even if it was strategically unsound. Even if it was wildly inefficient. The total destruction of the theocracy was non-negotiable. Before he was the sorcerer king, before he was the ruler of death, he was the guild master of Ainz Gaon. If a guild member is harmed by an outsider, the guild must visit absolute retribution upon the offender. It was the ironclad law of YGGDRASIL. It was the unwritten pact he had forged with Touch Me, with Albert, with Perencino. They were a guild of heteromorphic monsters, the villains of the game. They protected their own with extreme prejudice because the world hated them. This fierce, unwavering loyalty was the very foundation of their strength. Upholding it wasn't just a choice, it was his absolute responsibility as the keeper of their legacy. To let the slain theocracy survive this insult would be to spit on the memory of the 41 supreme beings. Therefore, Ainz's anger was righteous. The slain theocracy, Ainz murmured. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet toward absolute zero. Beside him, Mare, a level 100 NPC capable of leveling entire armies, felt a genuine, terrified shiver run down his spine. The pressure emanating from his master was not magic, it was the sheer, crushing weight of his malice. We will show them the folly of their actions, Ainz declared to the empty air, his crimson eyes burning with a cruel, eternal light. They shall learn, in their final agonizing moments, that there is one rule in this world that cannot be broken: you do not steal from the great tomb of Nazarick.